Hiding in our hotel room surveillance, I watched Jessica tell Patrick. He's so desperate for a successful business, he'd never question where his money really goes while planning my destruction. I kicked down that door and saw my wife of 15 years freeze mid-kiss with my former employee, both of them naked on sheets I'd paid for with money from the auto repair empire I'd built from nothing. Wade, wait, I can explain. Jessica scrambled for the hotel bathrobe, but I was already calculating. 42 years old, 3 successful shops across the county, and a net worth of $2.3 million that apparently made me target practice for amateur con artists. Patrick Mullins, I said calmly, watching my ex-employee's face drain of color. Still stealing from me, I see, though your methods have certainly evolved since I fired you for skimming cash 5 years ago. Patrick tried to cover himself with a pillow. This isn't what it looks like, boss. It looks like you're about to discover why successful businessmen don't get successful by being stupid. I pulled out my phone and showed them the recording app that had been running for the past 20 minutes. Jessica, that conversation about my money was particularly illuminating. Care to explain how you've been moving funds from my business accounts? The color drained from Jessica's face as she realized I'd heard everything. Their entire plan. The fake sister visits that were actually hotel meetings. The gradual siphoning of money from my shops. Even their discussion about taking out life insurance on me. My wife hadn't just been cheating. She'd been conducting financial warfare. I need to understand the scope of this theft, I continued, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Patrick, you mentioned $400,000 already moved to offshore accounts. Jessica, you talked about the Costa Rica house lease in your name. Shall we discuss this like adults, or should I call my lawyer first? Jessica finally found her voice. Wade, please, we can work this out. It was never supposed to hurt you. You took out a $2 million life insurance policy on me 6 months ago, with Patrick as the secondary beneficiary. That suggests a very specific type of not hurting. Patrick stood up, grabbing his clothes. I'm leaving. This is between you and your wife. Sit down. Something in my tone made him freeze. You're not going anywhere until we discuss your debt situation. I know about the Russians you owe money to, Patrick. $250,000 plus compound interest. That's why you needed my wife's help accessing my accounts, isn't it? The fear in Patrick's eyes confirmed what my private investigator had discovered. This wasn't just adultery and theft. This was a desperate man using my wife to steal enough money to avoid getting killed by loan sharks, while simultaneously planning to eliminate me and inherit everything through Jessica. Here's what's going to happen, I said, settling into the hotel room's chair like I was conducting a business meeting. You have 48 hours to transfer every stolen dollar back to my accounts. All of it. The offshore investments, the property purchases, the cash reserves you've been hiding from Jessica. I can't. Then you'll explain to Clarence Holmes why you can't. Clarence runs security consulting for my shops. He also grew up in the same neighborhood I did, where people who steal don't get second chances. I smiled coldly. Unlike me, Clarence doesn't believe in legal solutions. Jessica was crying now, but I felt nothing. 15 years of marriage, and she'd been planning my murder while emptying my bank accounts. Jessica, you'll sign divorce papers that leave you with exactly what you brought to this marriage, nothing. You'll also sign documents accepting full legal responsibility for every fraudulent transaction in your name. Wade, I'm your wife. You were my wife. Now you're a co-conspirator in a conspiracy to commit murder. Choose your next words very carefully. I stood and walked toward the door. Patrick, those Russians I mentioned, they'll be receiving an anonymous tip about your location and current financial status. I suggest you prioritize getting my money back over whatever relationship you think you have with my soon-to-be ex-wife. You can't do this, Patrick said desperately. I built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing through careful planning and strategic thinking. You seduced a married woman and stole money to pay gambling debts. We're about to discover which approach works better in the real world. I paused at the door. Jessica, you have until tomorrow evening to decide whether you want to handle this through lawyers or through the kind of people who don't accept payment plans. Your choice. The next morning, I sat in my first auto shop's office reviewing surveillance footage from the hotel. After I'd left, Jessica and Patrick had spent 3 hours arguing, with Jessica discovering that Patrick had been skimming money from their joint theft operation. She'd trusted a con man to be honest with her while helping him rob her husband. The irony was almost artistic. My phone rang. Oliver Doyle, my lawyer, who owed me favors dating back to when I'd personally handled gang members threatening his family years ago. "Wade, I've got the preliminary financial analysis. Your instincts were right. They've moved $437,000 over 14 months. But here's the interesting part. Patrick's been double dipping. Every account Jessica set up with your stolen money, he's been siphoning additional funds from. She thinks they have $400,000 together. He actually controls closer to $600,000, with $200,000 hidden from her. So, he was planning to betray her too. Gets better. I found the Costa Rica property lease. Patrick signed a 2-year agreement using Jessica's social security number and a forged signature. If everything goes wrong, she's liable for 24 months of rent on a house she's never seen, while he disappears with money stolen from both of you. I leaned back in my chair. Patrick Mullins was a professional predator who'd perfected the art of leaving his accomplices to face consequences alone. But he'd made one crucial error. He'd assumed Wade Wu was just another mark to be conned and discarded. "Oliver, I need divorce papers drawn up. Adultery, fraud, theft of marital assets. I want everything protected under irreconcilable differences with evidence of criminal activity." "What about law enforcement?" "Law enforcement moves too slowly. I need this handled privately and permanently." My second call was to Maria Gamble, a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. Maria had helped me investigate a potential business partner years ago, discovering embezzlement that saved me from a disastrous merger. I need complete financial profiles on both targets, every account, every transaction, every asset, legal and illegal. "This won't be cheap, Wade. Deep financial investigations require time and resources." I placed a briefcase containing $50,000 in cash on her desk. "How much time do you need?" 72 hours. You have 48. While Maria worked, I drove to each of my 3 shops, ostensibly for routine inspections, but actually to plant seeds of a much larger plan. I spoke privately with key employees, asking carefully crafted questions about loyalty, about what they would do if the business faced serious threats, about whether they could keep sensitive information confidential. I had learned long ago that loyalty couldn't be bought, but it could be cultivated. Every person I spoke with remembered specific kindnesses. Christmas bonuses when their kids needed surgery, promotions when other shops wouldn't hire them, second chances when their own mistakes could have cost them everything. By evening, I had assembled a network of allies who would do almost anything to protect the man who had protected them. My final meeting was with Clarence Holmes, whose official title was security consultant, but whose actual function was solving problems that couldn't be solved through conventional means. We'd grown up in the same neighborhood, and when Clarence's daughter had needed surgery that insurance wouldn't cover, I'd paid for it without being asked. "I have a situation that requires permanent solutions," I told him over dinner at a truck stop outside town. Clarence listened without interruption as I outlined the betrayal, the theft, and the complete violation of everything I'd built. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "What's your endgame, Wade?" "Complete destruction. I want them to lose everything they've stolen from me and everything they think they own. I want them to understand what it feels like to have their entire life revealed as a lie." "This isn't just about money, is it?" "No, it's about respect, about consequences, about teaching 2 people that there are men in this world who can't be stolen from, only awakened." Clarence nodded slowly. "I can have resources in place within a week." "You have 3 days. The next evening, I arrived home to find Jessica cooking dinner, humming softly to herself, playing the role of devoted wife with expertise that would have been admirable if it weren't completely false. She kissed me when I walked in, and I had to suppress the urge to grab her throat and demand the truth. "How was work?" Jessica asked, her voice bright with false concern. "Interesting. I've been thinking about expanding, maybe opening a 4th shop." Jessica's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "That sounds expensive." "I've been looking at a place across town. Perfect location, but it would require significant investment. I might need to liquidate some assets to make it work." The flash of panic in Jessica's eyes was so brief that someone who didn't know what to look for might have missed it, but I saw it, cataloged it, and filed it away. "Maybe we should discuss any major financial decisions together," Jessica said carefully. "Of course. After all, we're partners in everything." That night, as Jessica slept beside me, I lay awake planning the systematic destruction of two people who had made the mistake of thinking Wade Wu was just another mark to be conned and discarded. Maria's call came the next morning. "Wade, you need to see this. Your wife is smart, but Patrick Mullins is smarter and greedier." She spread bank statements across her desk. "Jessica's been moving your money for 14 months, but Patrick's been moving her money too. Every account she set up, every investment she made with your stolen funds, he's been skimming from. He's planning to disappear. More than that. Look at this." Maria produced a lease agreement. Patrick signed a 2-year lease on a house in Costa Rica using Jessica's social security number and forged signature. If things go south, she's liable for 24 months of rent while he lives comfortably on money stolen from both of you. I felt cold satisfaction settle in my chest. Patrick wasn't just stealing from me. He was setting Jessica up to take the fall for everything. "There's more," Maria continued. "Patrick's been recording everything. Phone calls, hotel meetings, even intimate encounters. He's got enough evidence to destroy Jessica's reputation and implicate her in every aspect of the theft, while painting himself as a manipulated victim." The man was a professional predator who had perfected the art of leaving his accomplices to face consequences alone. But Patrick had made one crucial error. He'd assumed Wade Wu was just another mark. That afternoon, I called Jessica at work and asked her to meet me for lunch at our favorite restaurant, the same place where we'd had our first date 16 years ago. Jessica arrived looking beautiful and nervous, checking her phone constantly. "I've been thinking about our future," I began, "about what we want out of life." I pulled out a folder and set it on the table. "I think it's time for us to make some changes. Big changes." Jessica's face went pale as she opened the folder and saw property listings for houses in Costa Rica, complete with photographs and purchase agreements. "Our new life. I've been looking into retiring early, maybe moving somewhere we can really be ourselves." I watched Jessica's face carefully. "I found this place through a business associate, Patrick Mullins. You remember Patrick, don't you?" Jessica's hand trembled as she turned pages. "I don't understand." "Patrick's been helping me research expatriate living, taxes, property laws, the best ways to transfer assets internationally without triggering government oversight." My voice was casual, conversational. "He's got considerable experience with international finance." The color drained from Jessica's face as she realized I was describing exactly what she and Patrick had been doing with my money, but I was describing it like it was my idea, like I was planning to do it legally and openly. Patrick suggested we could liquidate most of our domestic assets and reinvest them offshore. He estimates we could have everything transferred within a month if we move quickly. Jessica's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it and I saw her face go from pale to gray. Whatever Patrick had just sent her wasn't good news. "I need to go," Jessica said suddenly. "I'm not feeling well." "Of course. Take the folder with you. Look it over and we can discuss it tonight." Jessica hurried out of the restaurant, clutching the folder like evidence of her own execution, which in a way it was. Jessica now had to choose. Warn Patrick that I somehow knew about their plan, risking exposure of their entire relationship, or stay quiet and hope my interest in Costa Rica was coincidental. Either choice would lead to the same result. Patrick would realize the situation had become too dangerous and would begin implementing his exit strategy, which meant he would begin cutting Jessica loose. That evening, I came home to find Jessica pacing the kitchen, the Costa Rica folder open on the counter, her phone pressed to her ear. She hung up quickly when she saw me. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine, just work stuff." Jessica's smile was strained. "I looked over those documents. It's interesting, but maybe we should think about it more. Actually, I was hoping we could speed things up. Patrick thinks there might be regulatory changes coming that could make transfers more difficult." Jessica's face went through a series of micro-expressions. Fear, confusion, calculation, desperation. I cataloged each one. "Maybe we should meet with Patrick together," she said finally, "so he can explain the details to both of us." I smiled. "Great idea. How about tomorrow night?" The meeting was set for 7 p.m. at Morton Steakhouse, neutral territory where both Jessica and Patrick would feel comfortable. I arrived early and selected a corner booth with clear sight lines to all entrances. Jessica arrived first, her nervousness obvious. She'd dressed carefully, professional, but attractive. The kind of outfit that suggested serious business while still appealing to the men in her life. Patrick entered exactly at 7, and I had to admire his composure. The man showed no sign of recognition beyond a polite smile, no indication that he'd been systematically looting my life for over a year. "Wade, good to see you again," Patrick said, extending his hand with perfect confidence. "Jessica's told me you're interested in some offshore opportunities." "Very interested. I understand you have considerable experience with international asset management." "Some," Patrick said modestly. "I've helped a few clients diversify their holdings in favorable jurisdictions." I nodded and pulled out a briefcase. "I've brought some documentation you might find interesting." Patrick's eyes flicked to the briefcase, then to Jessica, who had gone very still. I opened the briefcase and removed 3 folders, setting them on the table with deliberate precision. The first folder contains financial records from my businesses over the past 18 months. Revenue, expenses, asset transfers, the usual. Patrick relaxed slightly. This was familiar territory. The second folder contains surveillance photographs taken over the past month. Patrick's face didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. Jessica made a small sound that might have been a whimper. The third folder contains transcripts of conversations between various parties regarding my finances, my marriage, and certain planned relocations to non-extradition territories. The silence that followed was profound. Patrick's hand had stopped moving toward his water glass. Jessica was staring at the folders like they were venomous snakes. "Now," I continued conversationally, "we can discuss this like civilized people, or we can involve other parties. Your choice." Patrick recovered first, as I'd expected. Predators were always quick to assess new threats. "Wade, I think there might be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding." I opened the first folder and removed a bank statement. "Jessica, would you like to explain to Patrick why your signature appears on this withdrawal authorization for $50,000 from my business account?" Jessica's face crumpled. "Wade, please, or Patrick, perhaps you'd like to explain why you're listed as the beneficiary on a life insurance policy Jessica took out on me 6 months ago." That got Patrick's attention. I'd saved this revelation for maximum impact, and the look of genuine surprise on Patrick's face told me everything I needed to know. Patrick hadn't known about the insurance policy, which meant Jessica had been planning contingencies that didn't include her lover. "Life insurance?" Patrick's voice was carefully controlled, but I caught the edge of betrayal underneath. $2 million, with Jessica as primary beneficiary and Patrick Mullins as secondary. Interesting arrangement, don't you think? Patrick turned to Jessica with an expression that would have been terrifying if I hadn't been enjoying it so much. "You didn't mention any insurance policies." "I wanted to protect us." "Protect us or protect yourself?" I leaned back and watched as the alliance between my wife and her lover began to fracture in real time. This was why I'd included the insurance information, even though discovering it had been the most chilling moment of my investigation. Jessica hadn't just been stealing from me. She'd been considering whether my death might be more profitable than my betrayal. "There's more," I said, opening the second folder. "Patrick, are you familiar with the name Arturo Vance?" Patrick's face went white. "How do you—" "Arturo is a business associate of mine, has been for years. Imagine my surprise when he mentioned that someone had approached him about arranging an accident for a prominent local businessman. This was a lie, but I delivered it with such casual confidence that both Jessica and Patrick believed it completely. The art of psychological warfare was making your enemies destroy themselves with their own guilt and paranoia. "Wade," Jessica whispered, "we never—" "Never what? Never planned to kill me or never planned to get caught?" Patrick stood abruptly. "I think this conversation is over." "Sit down," I said quietly, and something in my voice made Patrick freeze. "You haven't heard the best part yet." I opened the third folder and removed a photograph of Patrick entering a hotel room, followed by another photograph of him, leaving 3 hours later with a briefcase. "That's the Riverside Hotel, room 237, last Tuesday night. The briefcase contains approximately $150,000 in cash that Jessica doesn't know about." Jessica turned to Patrick with an expression of dawning horror. What is he talking about? Or we could discuss the house in Costa Rica that Patrick leased in your name, Jessica. The one you'll be liable for even after he disappears with the money you've both been stealing from me. The trap was now fully sprung. Patrick realized he'd been outmaneuvered. Jessica realized she'd been betrayed by both men in her life, and I sat back to watch them tear each other apart. "You bastard," Jessica hissed at Patrick. "You were planning to leave me holding everything." "And you were planning to murder your husband," Patrick shot back. "Don't pretend you're innocent in this." I smiled. "Actually, you're both going to have bigger problems than each other very soon." I removed my phone and showed them the screen, which displayed a text message. "Package secured, awaiting instructions." Clarence Holmes has been monitoring this conversation. He's also been monitoring both of your residences, your financial accounts, and your communications. In approximately 10 minutes, federal agents are going to raid Patrick's apartment and Jessica's office. This was another lie, but I was counting on panic to prevent logical thinking. What they'll find is evidence of systematic fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. They'll also find evidence that Jessica has been embezzling from her own company to fund this operation. Jessica's face went ashen. She worked as an accountant for a major firm, and any financial irregularities in her work would end her career, even if they didn't result in criminal charges. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "Patrick, you're going to transfer every penny you've stolen from me back to my accounts, all of it, including the money you've hidden from Jessica. And if I refuse," my smile was cold, "then you'll find out what happens when you steal from someone who grew up in neighborhoods where thieves didn't live long enough to repeat their mistakes." Patrick's bravado cracked. "You're threatening me." "I'm promising you." I turned to Jessica. "And you, my dear wife, are going to sign divorce papers that leave you with exactly what you brought to this marriage 15 years ago. Nothing." "Wade, please. You had 15 years to be honest with me. You had 1,000 opportunities to be the woman I thought I married. Instead, you chose to be a thief and a would-be murderer." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I stood and placed $500 on the table. "This covers dinner. You have 24 hours to comply with my terms. After that, other people will handle the situation, and they won't be as generous as I'm being." I walked away, leaving Jessica and Patrick to face the wreckage of their carefully planned betrayal. Behind me, I could hear them starting to argue, accusations flying, the sound of two predators turning on each other when their prey proved too dangerous to handle. The next morning brought confirmation that my psychological warfare had worked perfectly. Patrick had attempted to flee the state, only to discover that his passport had been flagged for suspicious financial activity. TSA had detained him for 3 hours before releasing him with a warning that his travel was being monitored. Jessica called me her voice shaky and defeated. "We need to meet. I'll sign whatever you want. Good, my lawyer's office, 3 p.m. "Wade, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I am sorry." I considered this for a moment. "No, you're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." The divorce proceedings took less than an hour. Jessica signed every document without reading them, her hands shaking with exhaustion and fear. When it was over, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "What happens now? Now you learn to live with the consequences of your choices." "Will you press charges?" I studied my ex-wife's face, seeing perhaps for the first time the person she actually was beneath the mask she'd worn for 15 years. Weak, selfish, willing to destroy anyone to get what she wanted, but ultimately a small person who had made the mistake of trying to prey on someone stronger. "No," I said finally. "You're not worth the effort." That evening, I made one final call. "Clarence, it's time." 2 hours later, I received a text message with an address and a time. I drove across town to a warehouse district I'd known well in my youth, places where problems were solved permanently and questions weren't asked. Patrick Mullins was waiting for me, tied to a chair in the center of an empty building. His face was bruised, his clothes torn, and his eyes held the desperate terror of a man who had finally realized the game was over. "Wade," Patrick gasped as I approached. "Thank God. These men, they're insane. They think I owe them money." I pulled up a chair and sat down facing Patrick. "You do owe them money, $250,000 plus interest." "That's impossible. I never borrowed from Russians." No, but you stole money that was going to be used to pay them back. My voice was calm, conversational. You see, Patrick, I've been doing business with certain international financial institutions for years. When I needed investors for my first shop, I was connected with some Russian businessmen. Patrick's face went white. You paid them back years ago. I did, with money that technically belonged to you, since you'd stolen it from me. I smiled. Which means you owe them the money I used to pay my debt. 15 years of compound interest. The math was fictional, but Patrick was too terrified to question it. I don't have that kind of money. I know, that's why we're here. I stood and walked to where Clarence was waiting with two other men Patrick probably recognized from his nightmares. Patrick Mullins, I said formally, you made the mistake of thinking you could steal from me. You made the mistake of thinking you could seduce my wife and destroy my life. Most importantly, you made the mistake of thinking I was just another mark to be conned and discarded. I nodded to Clarence. You were wrong. 3 days later, Patrick's disappearance made the local news as a missing person case. His apartment had been abandoned, his car found at the airport, and there were conflicting reports about whether he'd boarded a flight to Mexico or simply vanished entirely. The police investigation was perfunctory. Patrick Mullins had no family, few friends, and a history of leaving town abruptly. People like him disappeared all the time. 6 months later, I stood in the office of my fourth auto shop, watching the morning crew prepare for another day. The business had expanded faster than I'd projected, fueled by insurance money from Patrick's theft, and liquidated assets from my divorce settlement. Jessica had relocated to Phoenix, working as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm. Low profile, no contact with anyone from her past. It was a fitting punishment for someone who had tried to destroy my life. My phone buzzed with a text from Officer Seth Mayer, the young policeman who had risked his career to warn me about Jessica and Patrick's conspiracy. Mr. Wu, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for my daughter. The doctors say the treatment is working. I'll never forget this kindness. I smiled and deleted the message. Some debts were worth paying, and some favors were worth returning. Wade Wu had learned the most important lesson of all. In a world full of predators, the only way to survive was to be the apex predator, and Wade was very good at surviving.